Alright everyone, let's talk about some epic champions in Raid Shadow Legends that if you end up coming across these epic champions, you are absolutely going to want to 6-star them, you're going to want to take them to level 60, and you're going to want to build them up, because once putting these champions on your team, you're definitely going to notice a major difference in your overall Raid gameplay experience. That is how strong these epics are going to be, and I would say without a doubt, all of these epics on this list are easily going to compare in power to many legendaries in the game. So with that being said, let's head over to the index, and we're going to start off in the Ogren tribe. And the first champion that we're going to talk about is none other than Skullcrusher. Now, Skullcrusher is an absolutely phenomenal epic champion. In my opinion, easily in the top 5 list of all epics in the game. Exactly where he is on that list kind of depends a little bit on the situation, but there's one thing in particular, and it's going to be his second skill that makes him so unbelievably good, and that is going to be his Stonewall skill. Places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Places a counterattack buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn. Now, it has a 4-turn cooldown. With a skill book, you can lower it down to a 3-turn cooldown, and it's not the ally protection or the unkillable that makes this skill so phenomenal. It's actually going to end up being that counterattack. And interestingly enough, Skullcrusher is the only epic champion in the game that has an area of effect like counterattack. Now, I say area of effect like because it's not quite like a complete area of effect counterattack. The other 2 champions that have an AoE counter are going to be Martyr and Valkyrie, which are 2 legendaries. Good luck getting those champions. Probably going to be very unrealistic for most people playing the game, but Stonewall is a good enough ability, and Skullcrusher is going to be good enough because even though it's not a complete area of effect counter, he doesn't actually place it on himself. So if you read carefully, places a counterattack buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Still an absolutely phenomenal ability. And with the combination of the ally protection and also the unkillable that he's going to end up getting, it's absolutely insane. So very strong ability for an epic. Area of effect counterattack is overall just going to be one of the strongest skills in the game. Some would even argue the strongest. It has absolutely insane implications in certain parts of the game, like the clan boss. So very, very strong. Now, very briefly, going over some of his other skills, we really focused on that second one, but he also has some decent other skills as well. His auto attack attacks one enemy, places a 50% heal reduction debuff if the target's defense is lower than this champion's. Skullcrusher is, of course, going to end up being a defense-based champion, so that's another really good thing about him is not only are you going to be building him for the second skill right here, but he's going to be really beefy, so he probably, hopefully, shouldn't be dying anytime too soon after using him as well. So that's a pretty solid auto attack that has a little bit of added heal reduction benefit right there, damage based on defense, of course. He also has this unshakable passive, decreases the duration of all debuffs on this champion by 1 turn at the start of each turn. This is really great. This is going to come in super handy and super useful for tons of different situations where you're going to be thrown a lot of debuffs. Essentially having the duration of debuffs applied to him, very awesome. He also has this increases ally resistant faction creeps by 45. You know, hey, that's something. It's better than nothing, but definitely, without a doubt, the best thing about this champion is going to end up being his Stonewall ability, and that is, this ability alone is going to soar Skullcrusher all the way up to the top of the lists when it comes to how good he is for an epic champion. So that's going to end up being number 1. Now, number 2 is also going to be another champion that has Skull in their name. I don't know if that's a sign by Plarium or not, but we're going to move into the Night Revenants for this one right here, and that is going to be right here, and we are going to talk about Skullcrown. Now, downside to Skullcrown is she is a Void Epic, and I tried my best in this video to only talk about a couple of Void Epics because they are going to be quite a bit more difficult to get than the non-Void Epics, but Skullcrown is an absolutely phenomenal champion. Just an insane skill kit, super powerful, super useful, and you'll see right off the bat, starting with the auto attack, her first ability is insane. Attacks all enemies, places an extra hit if the target has more than 50% HP. Now, you'll see Skullcrown a lot in PvP and in the arena, but even outside of the arena, this is an insane skill. You can turn Skullcrown into a phenomenal campaign farmer, even for dungeons or any kind of content where you're facing multiple enemies. This ability is absolutely awesome. So you get that added extra bonus attack if enemies have more than half life. Her second ability is also insane. It's another auto attack, or not auto attack, sorry, another area of effect that has an added benefit of a weaken on top of it as well. And with skill books, you can actually increase that 50% chance up to 75. You can lower the cooldown down from 4 turns to 3 turns, and a 25% weaken is the stronger version of weaken, so that is a very powerful debuff right there. Very strong ability. She also has this resilient passive, which places an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn every time their HP drops below 20%. With skill books, you can lower this down to a 4-turn cooldown. I know those of you guys who face Skullcrown in Arena, you'll probably notice this passive quite a bit because it can be a little bit annoying. It means that a lot of the times you won't be able to one-shot a team that has Skullcrown because of this passive. She has another passive where if you have Sinesha on the same team, it's going to revive Skullcrown with 30% HP, 8-turn cooldown, but with skill books, you can lower this down to a 6-turn cooldown. Even if you don't end up having Sinesha on your team and you don't get benefit from this additional passive though, she is still an absolutely phenomenal champion, easily in the top 5 to 10 list. You know, again, depending on kind of what implications where you end up using her in the game. And all to boot, she also has this 23% ally speed aura in the arena, which is another reason why you end up seeing her so much. So again, just like Skullcrusher, Skullcrown both have Skull in their name. Both are going to be absolutely phenomenal champions. Now we're going to move on to another champion, which surprisingly is not in everybody's top list for epics, but I'm going to explain why this is going to be a champion that you're absolutely going to want to take to 6 stars and 60 if you end up getting them. And this is going to be a champion in the High Elves, and we're actually going to talk about Royal Guard. That's right, Royal Guard. Again, in my opinion, Royal Guard is going to be in the top 5 list for all epics. And surprisingly, Royal Guard is not in the top 5 list for all epics for a lot of other people, but it is one ability in particular of why Royal Guard is in this list, and it's actually going to be his takedown ability right here. Attacks all enemies, damage increases according to enemy max HP. Now, I might have talked about this. I think I talked about this in my Cold Heart video on why this particular modifier is so unbelievably powerful. I think in the future, I'm probably going to have to dedicate more videos to this very specific damage modifier because that is how powerful it is. It is an absolute game changer. Having this damage increases according to max enemy HP. Cold Heart has a similar ability, which can easily hit for well over 1 million. Royal Guard has this ability, except it's on an area of effect. This ability can hit like an absolute truck. You can completely devastate bosses with this skill. And the fact that it's an AoE and it's on Royal Guard, who also has another, overall just a very, very strong skill kit. If you build this guy up properly and you are attacking the right bosses, Royal Guard is an absolute devastator. Absolute must builds to 60 if you get him. And those of you guys who don't really fully understand this skill in particular, keep an eye on the channel. I'm probably going to make several more videos talking about it because of how powerful it is. Without a doubt, the best damage modifier is going to be based off of enemy max HP. Now, his other skills are also very, very good, which is why this guy is going to be on my must-build list. His auto attack attacks on enemy has a 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. This is on the auto attack, so you have the strong version of decreased defense on the auto attack, which can actually be buffed up to a 65% with skill books. Very, very solid. Of course, you have that second takedown skill, which we just talked about, and then you also have this hamstring, attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 60% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Each hit also has a 60% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 25%. Absolutely phenomenal ability. Overall, 3 insanely strong skills, but on top of that all, this takedown ability with that enemy scaling max HP, absolutely insane. Must build to level 60 and 6-star champion. He also has this strong version of increases ally attack in dungeons by 35%, which is just another little added bonus as well. So that's going to end up being number 3 on the list, Royal Guard. And now let's move on to number 4. And this is going to be a champion in the Sacred Order. I think some people would probably not put this champion on their must-build list, but I think especially for those of you guys who are not in the absolute stages of the late game, this is going to be a must-build for most players. Now, if you have a billion legendaries and you already have a bunch of clan boss champions, you know, maybe you don't need to put this champion on the list, but I would say most people watching this video, you probably quite aren't at that point yet. And for how much Juliana offers and brings to the table, she is going to be, in my opinion, a must-build build. So you've got so much on a clan boss champion. You have her auto attack. First of all, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 10%. If you build up the champion properly, you can easily get 100% crit, so you're always going to get the benefit from this. You also have this ability right here, places an increased critical rate buff on this champion, which just makes her even easier to gear. Then attacks one enemy 2 times, places a 5% poison debuff on the target for 3 turns if the attack is critical. Will ignores the target's defense if Romero's on the same team. Even without Romero, you don't even have to worry about that. This is still an absolute insane ability. And again, as you get a little bit further along into the gearing process, building around getting 100% crit rate is not going to be that difficult, especially when you have an ability like this that makes it even easier because you get a crit rate buff. So you have that poison right there, but you also have this HP burn. Attacks one enemy, removes 1 random buff from the target, has a 75% chance of placing HP burn. Having this poison right here and this HP burn on those 2 abilities on an epic champion is absolutely insane. Juliana is going to do so much damage to the clan boss, again, especially to those of you guys who are more, I guess you could say, mid-game, that you are absolutely going to want to add her to your clan boss roster. You might end up outgrowing her eventually, but for most people, having this combination of HP burn and a poison on a very solid epic champion for the clan boss is going to be a must build to 60. She also has this crit rate aura in the arena, not really that big of a deal. It's better than nothing, but it's really the second skill and this third skill that makes her so unbelievably good. Now we're going to move to the second to last champion, who's going to be in the Skinwalkers, and this is going to be Steel Skull. Now, Steel Skull is just overall one of the absolute best defensive support type units in the game. Very similar to Juliana, Steel Skull is also going to be more clan boss focused, but he's going to be more clan boss defense focused, where Juliana was more clan boss offense focused. Now, his skill kit is incredible though. First ability, attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 10% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Now, 10% is really low, but once you skill book him, it's going to shoot all the way up to 35%, so definitely want to make sure to book this guy to get the maximum benefit from his auto attack. Then his second skill removes all debuffs from a target ally, then heals them by 40%. You can lower this down to a 3-turn cooldown. Very, very nice support utility ability right there. And finally, his third ability places a 60% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Heals all allies by 20% of their max HP. You can lower this down to a 4-turn cooldown. You can up the heal on it. It's the strong version of increased defense. Now, increased defense is also going to be very good for the clan boss. So you have this poison right here. You also have this utility ability, which synergizes really well with a lot of the debuffs that the clan boss can end up applying to your team members. And you'll also have this little heal here, but that large version of that increased defense buff on all allies. Super good skill kit, super insanely powerful champion. If you see Steel Skull, you're definitely going to see him on a lot of people's clan boss team. You can even go and take a look for yourself. If you have more mid-game players, mid to late game players, you'll probably see if they have Steel Skull, they're going to be on a lot of people's clan boss team right there. So he has this allied defense and faction crypts as well, just as an added little bonus to boot. And finally, the last champion that I wanted to talk about is a Void champion, which, as I mentioned, I didn't really want to talk about too many Voids in this video. I think this was only the second one, and that is going to be a newer addition to the champion list in Raid Shadow Legends, and that is going to be Madame Cerise. Again, in the top 5 list for all epic champions, in my opinion, at least on my list anyway, and it's particularly going to be from this ability right here. Midnight Ritual. This ability is disgusting, absolutely disgusting. To have this ability even exist in the first place, and then to have it on an epic champion is just disgusting. Removes all buffs from enemies, places a 50% decreased attack debuff and a 60% decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 3 turns. Now you can lower this from a 6-turn cooldown down to a 4-turn cooldown, and this is just completely insane. This ability, it might be the best ability on an epic. It might be the best debuff type ability. I don't exactly know how to classify it. It's just an absolutely insane ability. Disgusting is really the only word that I can use to describe how good it is. But overall, she's still a very good champion. Besides that right there, that's going to be the main focus of why she is so good though. She also has her auto attack, attacks one enemy, has a 20% chance of placing a fear debuff for 1 turn, increases to 30% if they're under a debuff, and increases to 45% if they're under 2 or more debuffs. And The second ability attacks all enemies, has a 40% chance of stealing a random buff, places a block, debuffs buff on all allies for 2 turns if any buff is stolen, places a true fear debuff for 1 turn on enemies who have buff stolen, and she also has this aura, places a shield buff on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP at the start of each turn. When attacked while under a shield buff, has a 35% chance of placing a fear debuff on the attackers. So Madame Cerise is not really an offensive based champion, even though her skills scale off of attack. It's really going to be mostly for this debuff right here. So what you can do is build her more defensive, more based around this passive, so you can make her very tanky, very beefy, to make sure that she's applying this insane debuff as much as she possibly can, and also to boost the power of her shield from her passive. I would generally worry less about her actual attack-like abilities and more so about her obvious insane debuff and her very strong passive. Insane Void champion, insane epic, definitely going to be a game changer if you end up building her and taking her to 60 and adding her to your team. So that was just a list of 6 champions. I know that there are plenty more insanely good champions in the game that are epics that are going to be game changers, but as you guys can probably tell, we're already at about 15-16 minutes, so I'm going to leave it here, and maybe if you guys enjoyed this video, I'll end up doing a part 2, because there are plenty more epics that if you do end up getting them, they are going to drastically change your Raid Shadow Legends gameplay experience. But for now, that is going to be it for the video today. I'm really hoping that you guys enjoyed. If you did like this video and you want more like this in the future, consider subscribing. If you want to help out, tossing a quick like means more than you can imagine. And if you're interested in more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, all that fun stuff, that should be popping up on the screen right about now. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.